So, good afternoon, everyone. The Rocks lecture series has been on a little hiatus, but we are back again with our 14th lecture in the series. I am Arndís Bergsdóttir, a Rocks postdoc and the organizer of these series. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing our latest addition to the Rocks family, our postdoc, Charlie Pierre Desmarais, who will speak to us about oceanic vortices, one of the most important features of the oceanic circulation. He is a postdoc at the University of Iceland, working on the understanding and characterization of oceanic structures in the Icelandic basin. So his work is done under ROCS, in collaboration with Ángel Ruiz Angulo as part of our team. He specialized in the study of mesoscale and submesoscale ocean dynamics during his PhD from the University of Western Brittany and a NASA-funded postdoc at California Institute of Technology. So, Charlie, once again, welcome. And I'm delighted to have you with us today and give the floor to you now.
Thank you. So let me just share my screen now. Right. Thank you very much. So thank you all for being here. So let me just hide. Okay. Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. So as you said, today I'm going to talk about oceanic vortices. So this is a topic that I've been studying since the last 5 years, maybe. So during my PhD and during my previous postdoc at Caltech. And this is also a subject that I continue studying here during my postdoc funded by ROCS here at the University of Iceland. So as I told you, I will talk about oceanic vortices, and I won't try to make of you oceanic vortex experts. Instead, I will try to convince you that oceanic vortices are one of the most important features of the oceanic circulation. So this is my task today. So in the end, you will tell me if I succeeded in my task. So let's jump in. So as I told, I'm going to talk about oceanic circulation, so about oceanic currents. And when we think about oceanic currents, this is the kind of thing that we have in mind. So here it's an extract of a YouTube video trying to explain how does the Gulf Stream work. And you can see the typical view of oceanic currents, where we schematize currents as big conveyor belts, big currents that go along a straight line. And so the thing is that this view is not entirely wrong, but it's not very true, because in fact, what currents do is more something like that. So what I show here, it's a kind of an old school map, but still it's a map of temperature in the Gulf Stream area. So you have 6 different times, and each map presents longitude and latitude and the temperature on this map. Where it's hatched, it's cold, and where it's white, it's warm. And the point here is that the Gulf Stream front is along this line here, and the current typically follows this line. And you can see that the Gulf Stream doesn't flow along a straight line. It doesn't go like that. Instead, it oscillates. It creates what we call meanders. And what's very interesting is that eventually these meanders can grow and detach and form that kind of structures. And these structures are what we call oceanic vortices. So oceanic vortices, it's very simple. It's just a current that flows following a circular-like shape like that. And the size of this vortex, at least the vortices that I'm going to talk to you about today, are typically 100 kilometers wide. So basically, it's just exactly what you have in your cup of coffee when you're stirring it, but 1,000,000 times larger, so about 100 kilometers wide. But a big disclaimer here, we don't deal with that kind of vortex, so it doesn't exist in reality. So when you think about oceanic vortex, you could think about that kind of movie or thing. But no, when you are on a boat and that you are above an oceanic vortex, this is what you see. So this is a photo I took when I was on a ship trying to sample an oceanic vortex. And so we are right on top of a vortex, and you can see that you cannot see anything, you cannot feel the presence of a vortex. So it's not like that at all. But very interesting fact, here you have a line, and this line carries an instrument which is 1,000 meters deep. And this instrument measures the current. And what you can see is that the line carrying the instrument is tilted. It's not vertical, meaning that something underneath the boat, is advecting the instrument, and this is exactly the signature of the vortex. So here you cannot see the vortex, but it is indeed below the boat because it's tilting the line here. So back to this data. So why did I show you this very old school data of an oceanic vortex? Because it is, for me, I think, the first observation of an oceanic vortex at sea. It was done in the 1950 by a group at Woodsole Oceanographic Institution in the US. And this is very remarkable because at this time, the group managed to measure pretty well this vortex that they call Edgar. So here you have the same map, and you can see the temperature fronts here of the Gulf Stream, but you can also see small arrows that follow these lines, and these arrows are the current at the surface. And at this time, in the 1950s, it was very complicated to measure surface currents in the ocean. So they had to deploy very old school instruments. So they use what we call a geomagnetic electrokinetograph. So don't ask me any question about that. I don't know how it works. The point here is that it was very complicated to do, and it was very hard work to do that. And furthermore, to do such an observation, authors, the group had to deploy 6 ships. So here it's an extract of the paper. They had to deploy 6 ships and a plane just to measure one vortex. So it was a very huge effort to measure a particular vortex. So this is now not how we do now. Now we use another kind of instrument, which is a bit more evolved, and we just launch satellite into space, and from space we are going to observe the ocean and observe what's happening at the surface of the ocean. Thanks to these satellite measurements, what we can do is that we can just obtain that kind of map. So don't look at exactly what I'm showing, what is the quantity I'm showing. The point here is that using satellite measurements, we can now have the state of the ocean every day at every point in the ocean, and we can just study the ocean using that kind of satellite data. And for example, if I show you here this snapshot, you can see in the Gulf Stream area, so the same area the author in the 1950s were talking about, you can see here some circular-like patterns, which are exactly the kind of vortices that author sampled in the 1950s. So for them, it was very complicated because they had to send 6 ships at sea. Now, using satellite altimetry, you can just download the data. It's very easy, it's free access, and you can just study the ocean like that. So now we can measure the surface circulation in near real time using satellites. And I just wanted to make a very small point of how we are doing that. So the principle is very easy. So we have a satellite which is in orbit, okay? And the satellite will measure the distance between itself, and the surface of the ocean. So we have this radar altimeter ranging here. And if you know the reference ellipsoid, the sea level, and the geoid, you can retrieve a particular quantity, which is ocean topography here, but we also call it sea surface height or sea level anomaly, depending, but this is always kind of the same data. And so we have one number, which is the height of the elevation of the sea surface, and using a little bit of theory that says that the water flows along the isopressure, meaning that if you have a high pressure and a low pressure like that, the water will flow along the slope of isopressure like this. And this is very useful for our purpose of studying oceanic vortices because we know, thanks to this principle, that if we have a bump in the sea surface height, a bump like that or a hole, it's the same, we will have a vortex. So it's very useful. Each time you observe a bump in the satellite measurements, each time you will have a vortex. So if we have a map of sea surface height just like that, we can now say that each time that you have a blue or red pattern here, which is a bump or a hole in the sea surface height, it means that we have a vortex. So just by detecting vortices from that kind of map, we can draw some conclusion and compute some statistics about vortices. And for example, what we can do, what you have on the left, is that we can measure the lifetime of oceanic vortices. And you can see that using that kind of data, we can infer the lifetime of vortices, and we can see that they can live for several years. So meaning that oceanic vortices are very long-living features of the ocean. And also, we can see that vortices can propagate over very large distances, up to thousands of kilometers. So here, important point, you have to take-home message, vortices are everywhere in the ocean, as we can see in such map, and they are long-living and can propagate over thousands of kilometers. So this is what we do when we measure the elevation of the sea surface. Another thing that we can do using these satellites is just to take pictures. So for example, here, it's a true color picture, so just a photo taken by the satellite. And you can see here the ocean. I don't remember exactly where was this picture taken. I think it's in South America. Anyway, the point here is that you have to observe this blue pattern here. This blue pattern is the signature of chlorophyll, and so biogeochemical activities, meaning that here you have a lot of phytoplankton blooms, and so a lot of life happening here. The point here is that in this blue pattern, you can see some vortex-like structures, and indeed, these are vortices that advect this chlorophyll here. And we can see such example of observation everywhere in the ocean. For example, here, another picture taken by the same satellite, which is off the coast of Canada, where you can see a big vortex about 100 kilometers wide, which advects again chlorophyll and phytoplankton. Here the same, it's off the coast of Ireland here, where this one is quite striking. We can really well see the phytoplankton bloom, which is advected by the vortex. So the message here is that vortices really impact the water column properties via steering of water masses. So steering is just how the vortex will advect and make the water move on the horizontal, but they are also going to upwell some properties, for example, some nutrients at the surface, and so create this huge phytoplankton bloom. And here it's a small picture of the kelp forest of California, a place where there is a lot of life in the sea. And this kelp forest is in part due to the fact that you have a lot of upwelling and vortices in the area that create all this life under the sea. So this is the nice picture. Vortices can create or bring life to places. If we look at other pictures, for example, this one, so here it's in the Gulf of Mexico. Here you have the coast of Louisiana. And this is a picture taken in 2010 during the oil leak created by the Deepwater Horizon leak. So here in white, it's oil in the ocean. And what's remarkable is that during this oil leak, this oil got trapped in a vortex. So this is what you have here taken by satellite. And you can see that the vortex really make this oil move following its current, meaning that vortices will also impact other properties than just biochemical tracers, but also pollutant like oil, but they are also going to advect plastics, microplastics. So it's really important to understand them, to know where all these tracers will end up when they are in the ocean, and how we can forecast how the oil leak are going to behave. Another nice and interesting point is that, so obviously you have the ocean, and on top of the ocean you have the atmosphere, and we know that there is a strong coupling between the ocean and the atmosphere, and especially with extreme events in the atmosphere. And extreme events can be like, for example, hurricanes. So here it's a picture of Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf of Mexico too. And this is a very interesting fact, which is that Katrina and other hurricanes can be intensified by the presence of eddies underneath. And it can be shown here by this map. So what you have here in color is again the sea surface height, so the elevation of the surface. And remember that the flow will follow this line here, meaning that where you have this bump, this red bump here, it means that you have a big vortex, which is the loop current eddy, loop current vortex here. And here in black, you have the track of Hurricane Katrina, and the white numbers are the sustained wind speeds in miles per hour, so very large winds. And the point here is that, so Katrina traveled west like that, and then it passed over the vortex. And at the time it passed over the vortex, the hurricane intensified and become bigger and bigger. And this is why when it hit the coast of Louisiana, it was so intense, because it just passed over this very warm water carrying vortex. So this is something that's very important, because we have to really understand the vortex dynamic and the ocean circulation to be able to forecast well how this cyclone can intensify, these atmospheric cyclones. And this is still an ongoing question, so we don't have all answers now, but this is a pattern that can be seen for several cases. For example, here you have the same example for Rita, another hurricane during the same year, where you had also an intensification of the hurricane when it passed over the vortex. So vortices impact the water column properties, but are also key for the ocean atmosphere exchanges, so it's very important to study them. So with everything I've shown to you until now, we can say that vortices at the surface of the ocean are now pretty well known, thanks in part to satellite measurements, because we can cover the whole ocean and understand what's happening at the surface. But an ongoing question, and something from which we don't have answers, is what's happening at depths. So are there vortices at depths? Are they as important as at the surface? And this question is still an ongoing question. And to answer this question, we have to go at sea, because we cannot do that by satellite. So what we can do, for example, is just go on a boat and measure the water column properties by deploying some instruments. And we can obtain, for example, that kind of map. So here it's a vertical section. So on the x-axis, you have the distance along which the boat traveled. And on the y-axis, you have the depths. So here the depth, it's about 1.5 kilometer depth. And this map was taken at the Mediterranean outflow. So here you have some warm and salty water outflowing from the Mediterranean Sea. And you can see that here on the left of the section, you have a big vortex, a big anticyclone, which is called a MEDI. And this MEDI will be very important because they carry the warm and salty water out from the Mediterranean Sea. So these vortices are indeed present at depths, and then they can be very important to bring some water masses away from their generation spots. Also, what we can do is that we can deploy what we call autonomous platforms, such as Argo floats. So it's a picture here of an Argo float in the water. These floats will just travel alone in the sea and make vertical profiles, such as this one, here temperature and salinity on the left. And by doing that, because we have a lot of Argo floats everywhere in the ocean, I think it's about 3,000–4,000 everywhere in the ocean at each time, we can just look at every profile in the sea and track where are eddies at depths. And so some authors have done that kind of study, and you can see here on the right on the map that these deep vortices, so it's a map of where are deep vortices in the sea, And you can see that they are everywhere. So deep vortices are similarly as for the surface everywhere in the ocean. Also, you can deploy other kind of instruments, and this one is kind of funny. So you can, for example, put CTD instruments, so an instrument that measures salinity and temperature. Here they put it on the head of a seal. And seal, when they hunt for fish, they can travel very large distances and dive very deep. And so here it's a section of temperature sampled by a seal. And you can see that they sampled the water column properties over more than 1,000 kilometers, very deep. And here you can see again the signature of deep vortices in the ocean. So these are a lot of ways to measure the ocean at depths, but these are ways of measuring it that are quite expensive and quite complicated to do. So what we can also do to study vortices is to create what we call realistic simulations, so numerical simulations of the ocean. And here you have a movie from a numerical simulation of the North Atlantic. It's kind of a high resolution numerical simulation. And what you have here is the salinity at 1,000 meter depth. And you can see when you look at it that there are vortices everywhere. So here you have, for example, the vortices at the Mediterranean Strait, so Gibraltar Strait here. And you can again see these MEDIs that I was talking to you about before that are created in the outflow here, so the same than in the in-situ data. And you can see that they really help in spreading the water masses. But here the point being that you can see vortices everywhere at depth too. So it's a bright picture, but in fact, it's very complicated to run such model because it creates hundreds of terabytes of data and it's very complicated to set up and to analyze, but this is a very great tool to understand what's happening at depths too. So from all these points, I hope I convince you that vortices are everywhere and that they are important for the water column properties, for the ocean atmospheric changes. And also, I hope I convince you that they are present everywhere at the surface and at depths. And I wanted to add something which is, for me, very important when talking about oceanic vortices, which is related to this study that some authors did 10 years ago. So these authors, so I won't go into details, but the point is that they calculated the transport induced by vortices. So the transport is just how much a current will carry water masses. And the point here is this value. So on the middle panel here, authors have shown that vortices can induce a transport of about 40 Sverdrup. So Sverdrup is a unit of transport. And this value is similar to the value induced by the large-scale circulation. So the large-scale circulation, meaning big currents like the Gulf Stream, Agulhas Current, Kuroshio, and currents like that. So that means that vortices are at least as important as the large-scale circulation for the transport of water masses. So it is really important to study them. And it means that here they are one of the most important features of oceanic circulation. But now, another question that we can ask, because as you told before, so I'm here doing a postdoc at the University of Iceland, and I'm studying vortices in the context of the Icelandic circulation. So in this place here, and this is a very important place because you have a lot of currents both at the surface and at depths, and all this current will impact the outflow of Arctic waters from the Norwegian Sea in the North Atlantic, and also it's a place where the North Atlantic water come and reach the polar waters. So it's really a cornerstone in the North Atlantic. So the question is now, are vortices important in this area too? So to do that, we can again look at simulations, because simulation will tell us a bit more about the ocean state in the area. So on the left, you have the surface temperature, and on the right, the temperature at 1,000 meter depth from a realistic simulation. So it's Iceland, so this is south of Iceland. And what you can see, for example, here, is that you have very So first, you can see that you have vortices everywhere. So yeah, they're important, but also you can see that there are very large vortices here in the Iceland basin. So the Iceland basin is this part of the sea, and you can see that you have these large anticyclones that can reach that are very deep reaching eddies, because we have their signature here at 1,000-meter depth too. And in fact, some authors have shown in the past that you have numerous vortices in the area. You can have more than 50 occurrences a year in this area. And why is it important? Because these large and deep reaching eddies are mostly anticyclones. And we know that anticyclones carry warm water in their core. And so carrying warm water in this kind of cold areas, in these polar areas, will really play a key role in the heat exchanges in the ocean. And this author also shown, so I won't go into details here, but that there is a strong correlation between the number of vortices and the oceanic heat content, meaning that the more vortices you have, the more heat you will bring at high latitude. And it can be very impactful for sea ice melting and things like that. So yeah, vortices are very important in the area at the surface, but also at the bottom, because you have a lot of small vortices that are created at depths here, and they will play a key role in carrying deep water masses in the open ocean. So some questions that we are going to... So yeah, first, the answer, are vortices important in the Icelandic oceanic circulation? Yes, they are important. And so we are going to ask several questions during this Rocks-funded postdoc. First, what are the characteristics of mesoscale eddies? So their formation, their dissipation, their lifetime, etc. How are they impacted by the local forcing? Because we know that local forcing can be very intense here in Iceland because of the wind, because of the temperature. Also, what is their role in the modulation of the regional circulation? And how will they impact biology and tracer evolution in the area? And finally, how these bottom-generated vortices impact the deep water spreading in the North Atlantic. So yeah, that's it. I think that's all. Thank you for your attention. So don't hesitate to ask any question or reach me if you have any question about that. So I end with a very nice picture. It's not the ocean, it's on Jupiter, but it's just nice because there are a lot of vortices there too. So yeah, vortices are important. Thank you.